to the NV Huddle YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be doing a new type of video where I talk about some of the craziest NFL facts that have happened throughout its 100-year history. Let me know if you'd like to see more of these types of videos, so drop a comment about that. And now let's move on to the actual video. So some of our facts will include some crazy fumbling numbers from quarterbacks, a crazy wide receiver season, and a really surprising winning percentage for a quarterback. So let's move on to the first fact in this series. The first fact is Daniel Jones had 18 fumbles in only 13 games played. What's even more shocking is this was the most fumbles by a single player since 2002, where Dante Culpepper had 23. Yeah, I repeat, 23 fumbles a game. That is an average of 1.44 fumbles per game. Daniel Jones averaged 1.38 fumbles per game, which still is super high. To be getting that many fumbles, that's crazy, because that just adds a whole more turnovers. Because the main turnover you associate with quarterbacks is interceptions, but many forget how important fumbles really are. And if a quarterback has a fumbling history and can't hold on to the ball, that can really hold their team back. Also, David Carr had 21 fumbles that year in 16 games, and he had an average of 1.3 fumbles per game. Looking even earlier than this, Kerry Collins had 23 fumbles in a season in 2001, but Daniel Jones had the fourth most fumbles in the century, and I repeat, in the century of all quarterbacks, and he only played 13 games. All of the other quarterbacks played a full 16-game season. So what this really shows us is that Daniel Jones, he needs to hold onto the ball, and that's probably what he needs to work on the most. Hopefully this offseason, that's what he's been working on, as that was his biggest weakness. Let's move on to the second fact now, where we're talking about Odell Beckham's success in the last 2 years. As we all know, Odell has not had the best career, or you can say, with Cleveland. He's played with Baker Mayfield, and it's not gone well. And a few key stats shows he's underperforming by a lot. He's had less receptions than Alvin Kamara. And let's remember, Alvin Kamara is a running back who also does have injury concerns. So he's missed some time, and he still has less receptions than Kamara. He has less receiving yards than Robert Woods, who's a really good wide receiver, but no one's going to put Robert Woods in a top 10 debate. People put Odell Beckham in a top 10 debate. He had less receiving touchdowns in the past 2 years than Antonio Brown, and Antonio Brown didn't even play this past year. He had one touchdown in his one game with the Patriots. So Antonio Brown had more touchdowns in 16 or 17 games than Odell Beckham had in 32 or 28. I believe he missed around 4 games. He also had a lower catch percentage than Juju Smith-Schuster, and that's really surprising considering Juju got a lot of targets this year, and not a lot of them were catchable. Considering the Steelers' quarterback situation was god-awful this past season, with Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges being the best options throughout most of the year. Hopefully Odell Beckham can have a better year this season with Baker Mayfield. Hopefully they can develop a better connection, and hopefully both of them can have a bounce-back year. So now let's move on to the third fact, where we talk about Ryan Anderson's forced fumbles. Ryan Anderson is a really underrated and not very well-known player. He's the outside linebacker for the Redskins, and he has a knack for punching the ball out. Ryan Anderson had 5 forced fumbles, which was one of the league leaders, or top of the standings. And the craziest part was he had more forced fumbles than sacks, which is really surprising, as most pass rushers normally have a lot more sacks than forced fumbles. But his forced fumbles, his high number of them, was a lot more than other players superstars like Von Miller, Danielle Hunter, and Fletcher Cox. And he also had lower sack numbers when two of those guys, Von Miller and Danielle Hunter, Fletcher Cox had 3 or 3.5 sacks. He didn't have that great of a year. But that is still very impressive for a player who does not receive that much time on the field. So now let's move on to the fourth fact, where we talk about the Seahawks versus the Eagles. This is a different fact, and it's not really about a single player, but this was very interesting. So, the Eagles and Seahawks played 2 times this year, both of them in Philadelphia, and both of them the Seahawks won. What's crazier is, both games ended in a final score 17-9, and both first halves ended with a score 10-3, Seahawks leading, and the Seahawks scored 7 points in both second halves, with the Eagles scoring 6 in both. This is crazy. One of these is like a regular season game, week 12 or something, and the other is the wild card round. One game Carson Wentz is playing, other he's hurt because of an injury that he occurred in the game. This is really surprising, and this just shows that these two teams have such good defenses that even with great quarterbacks like Wentz and Wilson, that their games are going to become defensive games. Now we'll move on to an individual player fact about T.Y. Hilton. In 2016, T.Y. Hilton led the league in receiving yards with 1,448. But some other stats are really going to surprise you. Despite having the most receiving yards, he was tied 10th in receptions, and he had around 5.2 or 6.2 receptions per game, which was really low. And he was tied for 14th in receptions per game. That is tied with Golden Tate, of all people. He was tied with Golden Tate for receptions per game. That's crazy. For someone to lead the league, but be getting that few receptions, that's around league average for a number 1 wide receiver. Tied 14th. That's league average. And for receiving yards per target, he was also tied 16th. He was not getting these crazy big chunk plays like other deep threats do, but he was getting all of his passes like they were middle amount of yards, like medium gains. They weren't some crazy amount that was just like unstoppable. He was just getting like these big 50-plus yard plays. And I just spoke about receptions per game. He actually had 5.7, not 5.2 or 6.2. So, that was a fact I wanted to share about T.Y. Hilton, but I just think it's crazy. But now let's move on to the sixth fact, which is the NFC East quarterback's fumble history. In the last 4 years, an NFC East quarterback has led the league in fumbles for 3 of those years. And the funniest part is, they've all been different quarterbacks for different teams. So in 2016, Wentz's rookie year, he led the league in fumbles, or was tied for first, with 14. Then in 2017, Eli Manning had 11, but he was only tied 4th. This was the 1 year that they did not lead the league. I believe it was Jameis Winston. In 2018, Dak Prescott was tied for first, who played for the Cowboys with 12 fumbles. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Daniel Jones had 18 fumbles, which is shockingly high. And no one was going to be tied with him with 18. Although Carson Wentz was a close second with, I believe, 16 or something. But this is really surprising. Maybe this has to do with the NFC East ability to get to the quarterback, as 6 of your games are against your division rivals, or it just has to do with scheduling. But this is really surprising, and a stat that really interests me. Now let's move on to the 7th stat, where we talk about Derek Carr's winning percentages, his career winning percentage. Derek Carr has a career winning percentage of 41.5%. That is extremely low. 41.5% is, on average, a losing season. That's around 6 to 7 wins a year. That is not good. He is below people like Mitchell Trubisky, who shockingly has a 56.1 career winning percentage. I was shocked when I saw that stat. That is just interesting in itself. Marcus Mariota has a 47.5 career winning percentage, and he actually has led the Titans to the playoffs for a few years. So he's had a few good years. And Brock Osweiler, the guy who probably received one of the worst contracts in sports history, has a higher career winning percentage than Derek Carr. Now, we all know that wins are not just what the quarterback can do for the team, but what other players can do. And it also has to do with the defense, the people around him, the coaches, etc. But this is really shocking, as I thought Derek Carr was like the stable quarterback who could get you like 7 to 9 wins each year. But it turns out that's not the case. As even players like Mitchell Trubisky have higher career winning percentages than him. Now let's move on. The 8th fact is Jimmy G's Super Bowl appearance percentage. In the Super Bowls that Jimmy G could have appeared in, he's been in 50% of them. He's been in 3 of the Super Bowls, or been on one of the teams that has made the Super Bowl 3 times in his 6-year career. To put that in perspective, Tom Brady has appeared in the Super Bowl 45% of the time in his career, which in itself is crazy for someone who's been playing for 19 to 20 years. That's just shocking. Peyton Manning has made it 22.2% of the time in his career. He made it 4 out of 18 times. And then Russell Wilson, who's made it 25% of the time, who made it 2 times back-to-back in 8 years. Patrick Mahomes also has a 50%, but he's only made 1 Super Bowl, which didn't qualify for this stat. Comment below if you think Jimmy G is going to lead the 49ers to Super Bowl next year. But now let's move on to the next fact. Phillip Lindsay was a huge, shocking, undrafted free agent pickup for the Broncos in 2018 when he set the league on fire by getting 1,037 yards in only 15 games, and 8 of those were starts, I believe. 11 to 8 of those were starts, which is very low, and in only 192 attempts. That is a 5.4 yards per carry mark. That is extremely high. No running back averages that. Like, very rarely do running backs eclipse like 5.1, 5.2, but 5.4 is just amazing. But then he came back down to earth as he had more attempts, more than 30 more attempts, but he had less yardages, he had lower yardage numbers, in more games played. His yards per carry number dropped by 1 whole yard, which is a crazy amount for it to drop by. That's a huge portion. So Phillip Lindsay basically had more rushing yards with less carries and less games played than in his 2nd year. That is just a crazy stat, and it's going to be interesting to see if Phillip Lindsay can have a bounce back year this year. Now let's move on to the final fact of this video, where we talk about Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers has been very consistent in his career, and he is not going to throw like 12 interceptions, 10 interceptions in a year very often. In fact, the last time he had over 10 interceptions in a season was 2010. 10 years ago. He's had 84 interceptions in his career in 181 career games. And to compare that to Jameis Winston, who is known for not being able to take care of the ball, he has had 88 interceptions in 72 career games. He has played less than double the amount of games than Aaron Rodgers, which is just crazy. He's played in not even 40% of the amount of games Aaron Rodgers has played, but has more fumbles than him. This just really makes me appreciate Aaron Rodgers for what he can do and how he's just able to throw the ball deep, and he will still have low interception numbers and still takes care of the ball. So thanks for watching this video, and make sure to comment your favorite fact you learned in this video. Thanks for watching, leave a like, subscribe for more of these types of videos, and have a great day.